They'd shared that stage so many times over 30 years, laughed together, sang together, built memories that defined an era. Johnny Carson and Frank Sinatra, two names that shaped American entertainment, two friends who understood the cost of the spotlight better than anyone. But May 1992 was different. The Tonight Show studio hummed with its familiar energy that night, but beneath the laughter, beneath the applause, something heavier lingered in the air. Johnny Carson was preparing to say goodbye to late-night television after 3 decades behind that desk. And Frank Sinatra, now 76 years old, knew this was their final moment together under those lights. The cameras rolled, the audience smiled, but Frank's eyes told a different story. What started as nostalgia, two old friends remembering the golden years, became something else entirely. Something raw, something true. Frank's voice, that instrument that had moved millions, began to crack when he talked about regret, about the roads not taken, about the people who mattered most. Johnny's eyes glistened behind his desk. The audience sat frozen in their seats. The laughter had stopped. Because they were witnessing something rare. Two legends removing their masks, if only for a moment. Two men who'd spent lifetimes performing, finally letting the world see what lived beneath the performance. And what they revealed that night would echo long after the cameras stopped rolling. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand where Frank Sinatra was in May of 1992. The chairman of the board, Old Blue Eyes, the voice. For 50 years, Frank Sinatra had been more than a singer. He'd been an American institution. From the Bobby Soxers screaming his name in the 1940s at the Paramount Theater, to his legendary Rat Pack years in Las Vegas with Dean and Sammy, to his stunning comeback in the 1970s with New York, New York, Frank had lived 1,000 lifetimes under the spotlight. But by 1992, time had caught up with him. He was 76 years old. His beloved wife, Barbara, worried about his health constantly. His memory sometimes faltered mid-sentence. The touring that once energized him had become exhausting. The man who once owned every stage he stepped on now moved a little slower, spoke a little softer, paused a little longer between thoughts. And the losses, God, the losses had piled up like snow in winter, cold and heavy and impossible to ignore. Dean Martin, his closest friend, his brother in everything but blood, had passed away just 4 months earlier in December 1991. Frank had been devastated. They'd shared 40 years together, the laughs, the Vegas nights, the films, the friendship that defined an era. And now Dean was gone. Sammy Davis Jr. had died 2 years before that in 1990. The Rat Pack, those golden boys who'd ruled Vegas and Hollywood with charm and talent and swagger, was gone. Frank was the last one standing, and he felt the weight of that solitude every single day. He'd spent his life surrounded by people, crowds of thousands, full orchestras, close friends, beautiful women, hangers-on who wanted a piece of his light. But now, in the quiet moments back home in Palm Springs, Frank Sinatra was alone with his thoughts. And those thoughts weren't always kind company. The regrets came at night, when the applause had faded and the house was still. The affairs that had hurt people he loved. The temper that had destroyed friendships over nothing. The years he'd prioritized fame over family, choosing another recording session, another tour, another show, over being home for dinner with his children. His kids, Nancy, Frank Jr., Tina, the relationships were complicated, marked by his absences, his demands, his inability to be just a father instead of Frank Sinatra, the missed baseball games, the forgotten birthdays, the conversations that never happened because he was always somewhere else, always chasing the next moment in the spotlight. They loved him, he knew that. But did they really know him? Not the legend, not the voice, just Frank. The man behind all those songs about loneliness and love and loss. The man who understood those emotions so well because he'd lived them, caused them, suffered them. Frank Sinatra had conquered the world, but he couldn't conquer time. And in 1992, time was running out. He could feel it in his bones, in the way his voice didn't quite reach the notes it used to, in the way memories from 50 years ago were clearer than what he'd had for breakfast. So when Johnny Carson invited him on The Tonight Show one final time, Frank said yes without hesitation. Not for publicity, not to promote a new album, but because Johnny mattered. Because their friendship, built over 3 decades of late nights and honest conversations and mutual respect, was one of the few real things left in a life full of performance. Frank needed to say goodbye, and he needed to say it to someone who understood. May 13th, 1992. Stage 1, NBC Studios, Burbank, California. The Tonight Show band, led by Doc Severinsen, played Frank on with The Best Is Yet to Come. The irony of that song choice wouldn't be lost on anyone watching. The audience rose to their feet immediately, the applause thunderous, genuine, full of love for a man who'd given them a lifetime of music. Frank walked out slowly, waving with that famous smile fixed carefully in place, his blue eyes scanning the crowd. But Johnny saw it immediately. The exhaustion behind the showmanship, the slight hesitation in his step, the way Frank's hand gripped the back of the guest chair just a moment longer than necessary. They embraced. A real embrace, not the Hollywood kind. Johnny's hand on Frank's back, Frank's hand gripping Johnny's shoulder. Two old friends holding on for just a second longer than usual. When they pulled apart, both men had moisture in their eyes, though they tried to hide it with smiles. The first 15 minutes were vintage Carson and Sinatra. Stories about the old days in Vegas. Frank teasing Johnny about finally retiring. Johnny teasing Frank about that toupee that everyone pretended not to notice. The audience laughed in all the right places. Frank did his Bogart impression. Johnny did his Johnny impression, that self-deprecating charm that had made him America's favorite host for 30 years. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed like just another Tonight Show appearance. But then Johnny did what Johnny did best. He got quiet. The comedian disappeared, and the real man emerged. He leaned forward in his chair, his body language shifting from entertainer to friend. The studio audience sensed the change. The laughter faded. Even the cameramen seemed to lean in closer. "Frank," Johnny said softly, his voice carrying that gentle authority he'd perfected over decades. "We've known each other a long time, 30 years, maybe more. You've been on this show, what, 40 times? 50 times? Frank smiled, that crooked Sinatra smile. "Lost count, Johnny, lost count of a lot of things." "Me too," Johnny said, nodding slowly. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But this is different, isn't it? This is the last time we're going to do this. You know it. I know it. Everyone watching knows it." The smile faded from Frank's face like sun disappearing behind clouds. He looked down at his hands, those hands that had held microphones in every corner of the world, that had conducted orchestras, that had held the women he'd loved and lost. When he looked back up at Johnny, his eyes were already glistening with unshed tears. "Yeah," Frank whispered, his voice barely audible. "Yeah, it is." Johnny nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch, giving Frank space to breathe, to feel, to be human. The studio had gone completely quiet. You could hear the air conditioning humming. Someone in the audience sniffled. "So let me ask you something I've always wondered," Johnny continued, his own voice thickening with emotion. "You've had this incredible life, Frank. The career, the fame, the music that'll live forever, everything a person could want. But looking back now, at 76, having done it all, having seen it all, what matters, Frank? What really matters?" The question hung in the air like cigarette smoke in a dark bar, heavy and inescapable. Frank was quiet for a long time. 10 seconds, 20. The audience didn't move. They barely breathed. Even the cameramen seemed to hold their positions, afraid that any movement might shatter this fragile moment of truth. When Frank finally spoke, his voice was different. Smaller, stripped of all the Sinatra swagger, just honest. "The people, Johnny." He shook his head slowly, like a man waking from a long dream. "It's always been the people, the ones who loved you when you had nothing to give back. The ones who—" His voice cracked, broke like ice on a warming pond. "The ones you lost along the way because you were too stupid, too selfish, too caught up in yourself to hold on to them." Johnny's hand moved across the desk, resting near Frank's. Not quite touching, but close enough. A gesture of solidarity between two men who understood what the spotlight cost, what it took from you when you weren't looking. "I lost Dean 4 months ago," Frank continued, and now the tears were visible, running down his weathered cheeks. He didn't wipe them away. "My brother, we went through everything together, everything, and I keep thinking, did I tell him enough? Did he know how much he meant to me? Because we never talked like that, you know? Men of our generation, we didn't. We just assumed the other guy knew. Johnny's own eyes were red now, wet with tears he was trying to control. But his voice stayed steady, gentle. He knew, Frank. Dean knew. Did he? Frank looked at Johnny with an expression of such raw pain that several audience members began crying openly. Because I'm not sure I knew how to show it. I knew how to perform friendship, how to make it look good for the cameras. But did I know how to just be there? Really be there? The camera pushed in closer on Frank's face. This was television history happening in real time. This was a legend crumbling and rebuilding himself in front of millions. You spend your whole life performing, Johnny, Frank said, his voice barely above a whisper now. Giving people what they want, the songs they want to hear, the personality they expect, the Sinatra they paid to see. And somewhere in there, you forget to just be real with the people who matter. The people who loved you before you were famous and would have loved you if you'd never made it at all. Johnny nodded, understanding flooding his face. Yeah, he said quietly. Yeah, we do. My kids, Frank continued, and now his voice was breaking completely. Nancy, Frankie, Tina, they're good people. They turned out good despite me, not because of me. I wasn't there like I should have been. I was always on the road, always chasing the next show, the next hit record, the next thing that would prove I was still relevant, still the best. And they grew up without me. They grew up with Frank Sinatra as a father, but they never really knew Frank. He looked directly at Johnny, then out at the audience, then back to Johnny. Do you know what that's like? To be the most famous person in the world and realize your own children don't really know who you are. They know the legend, they know the voice, but the man, the scared kid from Hoboken who just wanted to sing, they never met him, because I never let them. The audience was crying now, not just sniffling, but openly weeping. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was confession. This was a man trying to make peace with his life in the only way he knew how, in front of an audience, under lights, with a microphone nearby. And the women I loved, Frank said, his voice steadying slightly as he moved through his pain. Ava, God Ava. She was the love of my life, and I destroyed that because I was selfish, because I thought the world revolved around me and my talent and my ego. He laughed bitterly, a sound like breaking glass. The ego we have in this business, Johnny. The ego that makes us think we're special, that the normal rules don't apply to us, that we can hurt people and they'll understand because we're artists. Johnny's hand finally touched Frank's, just fingertips, but the connection was electric, visible, real. We're not special, Johnny said softly. We're just lucky. Lucky people got the chance to see what we can do, but that doesn't make us better than anyone else. No, Frank agreed, gripping Johnny's fingers like a lifeline. It doesn't, but it took me 76 years to figure that out. 76 years and losing everyone who mattered to finally understand that all those sold-out shows, all those hit records, all that fame, it doesn't keep you warm at night. It doesn't forgive you when you failed the people who loved you. It doesn't bring back the time you wasted. He turned to look at Johnny directly, and in that moment, the whole world could see two men having a conversation that transcended television, that reached into something deeper and truer than entertainment. You got out at the right time, pal, Frank said, his voice full of both sadness and genuine affection. You're walking away with your dignity, with Nancy by your side, with your sons who know who you are. You're walking away while people still love you, while you can still choose your exit. He paused, swallowing hard. I'm walking away with ghosts, Johnny. I'm walking away with a list of regrets longer than my hit parade. And I'm walking away alone, even when I'm surrounded by people. The studio was silent, except for the sound of people quietly weeping. Doc Severinsen had tears streaming down his face. Ed McMahon, standing off camera, had turned away. Even the hardened television crew, people who'd seen thousands of interviews, thousands of emotional moments, were wiping their eyes. Johnny's voice was thick, barely controlled, when he finally spoke. Frank, everyone in this room loves you. Everyone watching at home loves you. You gave us. I gave you a performance, Frank interrupted gently, not harshly, just honestly. And I'm grateful you loved it. But what did I give the people who really knew me? What did I give my kids when the music stopped? What did I give Ava when she needed me to just be a man instead of Frank Sinatra? He shook his head. Not enough. Never enough. Johnny couldn't respond. His throat was too tight, his emotions too close to the surface. Because they both knew Frank was speaking a truth that resonated far beyond this stage, far beyond Hollywood, far beyond entertainment. He was speaking about the human condition, about how we all, in our own ways, perform for the world while neglecting the people who see us without the makeup. Frank took a deep breath, and when he smiled, it was the saddest smile Johnny had ever seen. But we had fun, didn't we, Johnny? We had some laughs. We made some music. We gave people a few hours of escape from their problems. We did, Johnny said, his voice breaking completely now. We really did, Frank. And maybe that counts for something, Frank said softly. Maybe that's worth something in the final accounting. They sat there together in the silence, two old friends on a stage they'd shared for 3 decades, knowing this was goodbye. Not just to The Tonight Show, but to an entire era. To a version of themselves that would never exist again. To the youth that had carried them this far and was now finally, inevitably, releasing its grip. When they finally went to commercial, neither man moved. The audience remained frozen, afraid to break the spell. The cameras kept rolling for another 30 seconds, capturing Frank and Johnny just sitting there, hands touching across the desk. Two legends who'd become just two men facing the end of something they couldn't hold on to. Frank Sinatra would perform for 3 more years before retiring completely in 1995. He'd pass away on May 14th, 1998, 6 years almost to the day after that final appearance with Johnny. He died surrounded by his family, with his children at his bedside, the music finally quiet, the performance finally over. Johnny Carson would live until 2005, spending his final years away from cameras, away from applause, sailing his yacht, playing tennis, loving his wife Nancy. He never returned to television. He'd said his goodbye and meant it. But that night in May 1992 became something neither of them could have planned. It became a reminder that beneath every performance, beneath every smile for the camera, beneath every bow and every standing ovation, we're all just people trying to figure out what matters before it's too late. Frank learned it the hard way. The fame, the hit records, the sold-out shows at Madison Square Garden, they don't keep you warm when the lights go down. They don't forgive you when you failed the people who loved you without condition. They don't bring back the time you wasted chasing applause instead of holding the hands of the people who would have held yours for free, no ticket required. We spend so much of our lives performing, don't we? Being who we think we should be. Chasing success, chasing recognition, chasing validation from strangers, while neglecting the people who already see us, already know us, already love us despite our flaws. We put on the mask every morning, and sometimes we forget to take it off, even when we're home, even when we're with the people who should see us as we truly are. And then one day, like Frank, we look around and realize the stage is emptying. The friends are gone. The years can't be rewound. The children have grown. The chances to say I love you and I'm sorry and you matter more than anything have passed, like summer into autumn into the cold winter of regret. And the only thing that ever really mattered was right there all along, the people who knew us when the music stopped. The people who loved us without the performance, without the fame, without the carefully crafted public persona. The people who would have sat with us in silence and called it enough. Frank gave that gift to everyone watching that night. The gift of his truth, the gift of his regret. Not as a warning, but as an invitation to stop performing for just a moment and be real with the people who matter. While there's still time, while they're still here, while you can still say the words that need saying and make the gestures that need making and repair the damage that time and ego and ambition have caused. Because one day, the lights go down, the audience goes home, the band packs up, and all you're left with is the love you gave and the love you received when nobody was watching, when there was no applause to earn, when it was just you and another human being sharing this brief, beautiful, terrifying experience of being alive. Frank knew that by the end, and he wanted you to know it too. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of someone you need to call, someone you need to tell the truth to, someone you need to apologize to or thank, or simply say I love you to, don't wait. The stage doesn't stay lit forever, and the people who matter most won't be in the audience forever either. They're here now, right now, and they're waiting for you to take off the mask and let them see who you really are. Tell them, while you still can, while there's still time to make it right, while there's still a chance to be known, truly known, by the people who matter most. That's what Frank would tell you. That's what Johnny understood. That's what that night in May 1992 was really about. Two men who'd spent their lives performing, finally admitting that the only performance that ever truly mattered was the one they gave to the people who loved them when the curtain fell. Don't make Frank's mistake. Don't wait until you're 76 and alone with ghosts to realize what mattered all along. Do it now, today, this moment. The people you love are waiting.